Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you are one of the charitable folks who clicked on my first video, it's mucho appreciated. I am, as you can tell from the god-awful camera angle today, still a beginner at YouTube and still very much learning the ropes. I don't want to spend too long on this intro because this is a very lengthy video according to the script that I have written out for it, and I really don't want to belabor the point any more than it needs to be. However, that being said, I am going to say just right off the top, at the top of the video, that I have tried every angle in this room to make the bounce between me looking you in the eye down the camera lens and just bumped into the microphone, and over here at my script as naturalistic as possible, and it's just not happening. I have raised this tripod, I have lowered this tripod, I've moved this tripod, I've moved this microphone, I've moved my chair. I'm a one-woman show, okay? I'm not Kelly Clarkson. I can't afford a teleprompter in the camera that I'm looking at because this is a one-man band. This is a low-rent operation as of right now, and I'm doing my best. But what that means for you in your, viewing process of this video is, unfortunately, I will have to bounce between looking at you and kikiing and looking at my script over here to make my point. And I think it's important that it's scripted because today we are going to be talking about my favorite and least favorite housewives of every single franchise. Now, I am a Bravo-holic. I'm sure if you're watching this, you're probably also a Bravo-holic or just a obliged family member who is not interested that you feel obligated to watch. But I know as a Bravo-holic that the fans are super intense, and I know that you guys are going to come for the jugular and slit my wrists if I don't have a fully formed argument, and even if I do, you still might do that. So I came prepared. I came with the best scholarly argument that I could make for every single one of my picks. And so when I'm looking off to the side, it's because I want to be able to, back up everything I say with facts and figures. It's very important in the Bravoverse to have your facts, receipts, and figures. I'm going to lay out a few ground rules before we get started. The first of which being that I'm not going to be including any defunct franchises today. The DCs and the Dallases of the universe. Who gives a fuck? Not me. Moving on. Second of all, unless they made a profound impact, I'm not going to go for the easy picks for least favorite. So like one season wonders, a la season 6 of Jersey, or Anne-Marie Wiley comes to mind recently. Like if they were on for one season and boring and or annoying and then they left, I'm not going to include them. Every single pick for favorite and least favorite is going to come from a solid pool of candidates who are, true to this, not new to this. Like they had to have been on the show long enough to have made a profound impact on Bravo and on their respective franchises. So with that being said, looking off to the side to get started. I'm so sorry. I've tried literally every camera angle. Oh well. I'm going to start doing this in chronological order. I think that is the way that we're going to structure it so that it makes sense and so that we keep this train moving. But yeah, first franchise, OC, Real Housewives of Orange County. I'm going to be straight up and super honest and say that Orange County is probably one of my least favorite franchises ever. I think that Beverly Hills rendered it not useful, and I think it's past its prime, which can be argued about a lot of franchises. So, I'm not here to bringing it down, but Orange County to me seems like the one with the least identity. Like I have trouble understanding what the common thread between these women is supposed to be. But that being said, my favorite in all of Orange County history is Ms. Tamra Judge.
You don't have to do anything with him. I didn't say bad things about Brooks. I said I don't think that he's good for you.
How do you know what's good for me?
That's my opinion! Don't you get it?
Now, I think my picking of Tamra is going to introduce a theme that you'll see run through a lot of my favorites, which is that the absolute best housewives share the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think that that's fair to say, regardless of who your favorites and least favorites are. They share everything regardless of what they think the audience's perception of them will be. And I think Tamra's progression specifically, because she's been on the show for so long that it's been a really rewarding watch to see her journey. She kind of went from submissive housewife to a central reality TV figure and highlighted this theme of broader personal transformation that I think would trickle down into a lot of future housewife storylines. I think Her journey resonates with me and also probably a lot of other women, as it reflects aspirations of individuality and strength that a lot of us can relate to, especially in the modern era. I think many viewers kind of see her as this queen bee, mean girl, but I think that persona sort of underscores the complexities of female friendships through reality TV and showcases how competitiveness and rivalry can sometimes overshadow camaraderie. And it resonates on an emotional level because that's not necessarily anti-feminist and it's not necessarily regressive. It's just more so a reflection of reality. And also, I think a really interesting exploration into women's journeys, you know, from having very little societal resources to now. It's been interesting to see how her relationships with women have changed over the years as she's gained more independence. I also think that watching OC during the era of the recession and the financial strains experienced by the entire cast, Tamra included, mirror a lot of real world challenges and emphasize the show's relevance to kind of a wider audience and brought a lot of authenticity to their experiences, which maybe wasn't the case in those earlier seasons when they were all just kind of like living lavish. I also think that she has had one of the most unique storylines across any franchise in Real Housewives history, which is her struggles with parental alienation, highlighting kind of an often unseen emotional toll of reality TV, but also just of Hollywood and the entertainment industry in general. And it portrays a really relatable and vulnerable side that adds depth to Tamra on the show. I think the complexities of her relationships with the other cast members, especially ones that were, you know, on for a really long time and very close to her, like Vicky, kind of illustrated that fluid nature of alliances with informal networks and showed how kind of past conflicts could influence present dynamics. Tamra's role in shaping notable tropes, not just in the Real Housewives universe and canon, but also across all of reality TV, underscores her real significance. I think she was a transformative figure whose strategies became replicable by later shows and participants. If you think about all the times that Real Housewives have been referenced or alluded to in pop culture by having women throw drinks on one another, and then think about how that was started by Tamra on OC, and now that kind of stretches beyond Real Housewives and has just become a moniker for reality TV as a genre and a motif for the entire genre. It's incredible to think that Tamra is responsible for that, but doesn't really get the credit that she deserves. So we love you, Tamra. Thank you for inventing the housewife blueprint, and I'm ready to get jumped because my least favorite from the OC is the OG, Vicky Gunvalson.
This is not funny. We are going on a cruise. This is not funny. You have a little family van. When do you ever bring a family van to pick up 6 people? Okay? This is ridiculous. You guys are everywhere. Why are you sending a family van?
Yes. Is she hilarious? Of course. Is she iconic? Of course. Is she an OG? Did she start the entire franchise? Of course. And flowers where flowers are due, tens where tens are due. But I do think that she fell into the trap that many OG housewives can't avoid, which is you're so entrenched in the show that you see yourself as irreplaceable, and it breeds a lack of personal growth and development. And it's not fun. It's not fun to watch as a viewer. It seeps out and it kind of poisons the cast around the person and eclipses their autonomy. I think that when an OG of that caliber and mentality as well is around, they will make everybody kiss the ring, which sort of leads to these very disingenuous interactions and a lot of fear amongst other cast members, which is not the best environment for interpersonal drama. And I think, you know, say what you want about Kyle Richards, but she is a super long-running OG without ever feeling like a disproportionately large presence to the rest of the cast. I think Kyle does a really good job of making sure everybody feels, as at least as a viewer, that they're on an even playing field. And she's like an executive producer of Beverly Hills now, and she still doesn't eclipse the other ladies. She still doesn't feel like a presence too large for the show. And I think that that's a good thing. I know people might take that as shady, but I think that that is a testament to a really good housewife who knows when to pull and when to push and when to evoke maybe the moniker of the OG and when to let it go. I think that the other example of somebody who is not wearing this title well would be Teresa in New Jersey, which is a shame because I love her so much and Jersey is my favorite franchise, but I think the character development with her has just sort of been stopped in its tracks, and it seemed like it was really happening once she was single and she had divorced Joe. And then I think in the last year, 2 years of Jersey, we've kind of seen some emotional repetition that's sort of polluting the entire franchise. It's very difficult when she thinks it's the Teresa show, very much how Vicky thought that it was the Vicky show. And then other cast members aren't really branching out from either side because I think that OG threat looms so large that nobody feels comfortable going on, any bridge to mend this divide. On a personal note about Vicky, because I did get off on a tangent a little bit about OGs there, I don't find even her most iconic moments to be particularly charming or funny. And it might be because I didn't watch OC in real time. I watched it. I mean, I was not even alive, I think, when it started. When did it start? I was born in 2001, so I might not have even been around when it began. And so I watched it all in one sitting, which might have clouded my judgment of her. Maybe upon a second viewing, I might be a little bit more charitable. But I will say for right now, I did not find anything that other viewers found funny or charming about her to be particularly appealing to me. I think the most I ever liked her was when she peed on the bed while they were on vacation. That was pretty good. But also it doesn't say a lot about you as a housewife that peeing on the bed is my favorite moment of yours. Moving on. Next, we have a franchise adrift, Ms. Real Housewives of New York. Now, this is Andy Cohen's baby, so I'm hoping that they're going to kind of take a breather and figure out what they're doing with this franchise before they jump back into another season with these newbies who are clearly too self-aware to be able to hold a major franchise. But my favorite in Real Housewives of New York across all seasons is the GOAT, the icon, the only, Miss Bethany Frankel.
Well, last night you treated my assistant who you've known for 4 years like
recognize her. I go into a zone. When you grow up abused, what
happens? My God, you're 60 years old. I grew up abused, so
you
stop.
shut things off.
Then you should be living in a commune by yourself in a padded room.
I know who she is.
That just says so much about you. You've been in my house sitting by a pool with her serving you drinks.
They didn't even say hello to me. Why didn't they say hello to me?
Because they're intimidated. You're on the show.
Intimidated?
I don't know. You got your tits hanging out, your hair down to here. You got crazy eyes. You got fucking chicken in your purse. Drinking fucking rosé behind the couch. Screaming that it's cold in here. You're a horror show.
Well, I am what I am.
Well, enjoy that.
Now, I realize that this is complicated now by the fact that she's launched a war against Bravo, against Andy Cohen, against reality TV production in general. I can do a separate video, I think, about my thoughts on that as a whole. I will say just in short that I do feel she's making valid points about unions, about worker protections, and ultimately things like benefits and what's it called? You know, the checks that they get? Royalties. You know what I mean. Royalties. I think that she's making really good points about reality TV stars who create these iconic moments and then it lives in the cultural ether forever, being compensated fairly the way that a writer on a song would be compensated when that song is played years later, or the way that a writer on television gets compensated. I think that makes sense and is fair, especially given the fact that they are literally putting their lives out on the line for judgment, for opinions, for fodder, and oftentimes it can even lead to criminal activity. We've seen the amount of housewives who've been robbed. So for me, I think that she's made fair points about that. I do think that it gets a little bit blurry when you talk about, the alcohol of it all and because there is a level of like personal responsibility where I'm like, the producers are not there to babysit these women. They need to be able to make rational choices for themselves on their own. Otherwise, if it's too hot, get out of the kitchen. That being said, her current crusade aside, when she was a Real Housewife, you have to think, before there was a wine line in every confessional, before there was a lip kit in every reunion clutch, there was Bethany. She was this one-woman hurricane, ambition, wit, vaguely neurotic charm. She didn't just waltz onto Real Housewives of New York and lunch and luxuriate. She came to work. And if you read an excellent book, The Oral History of the Real Housewives, Not All Diamonds and Rosé. The book tells us a little bit about the casting process for Real Housewives of New York and how Andy Cohen had actually argued against casting Bethany on the show. And I don't blame him for not thinking that she would be the right fit. At the time, she was, not the formula. She cracked open this gilded Bravo-tranium and told us not all housewives have to be housewives. Lowercase. At the time when the formula leaned more trophy wife, I think Bethany was unapologetically single, defiantly middle class, and grinding. While her castmates flitted from spa days to soirees, she was schlepping across Manhattan and hawking her brand like a woman on a mission. And because she was, there was no family money, safety nets, no millionaire husbands footing the bill for her. It was just her dream, and a logo that would eventually live on every shelf, in every grocery store, in every woman's pantry across America. She didn't set the mold that we just talked about that was set by Tamra on the OC. She kind of torched it. Her ambition was raw, sometimes ruthless, often messy, and that's what made it really thrilling. She fought hard, cried harder, and made every episode feel like a battlefield. Watching her build Skinnygirl in real time, it wasn't just good TV, it was a lesson in branding, hustle, the uncomfortable truth that would come to perforate many a Housewives franchise, that likability is optional when you are indispensable. And she kind of made this new blueprint that many housewives would come to follow in the years later. So Lisa Vanderpump, she has an empire of rosé and rescue dogs. There's Giselle Bryant on Potomac, who started her own beauty line, Every Hue Beauty. The modern entrepreneurial housewife all owe a debt to Bethany because she was the one who started that trend. She proved that the platform was not just for flaunting wealth, it could also build it. She also, obviously, say nothing of her quick wit and her one-liners. Bethany Frankel didn't play the game, she just rewrote the entire rule book. And for that, she's not just a great housewife, she is a blueprint. She is the standard. There's a reason why she went on to have her own talk show and is, to most people who don't watch The Housewives, she is seen as the ultimate housewife. I will say, little fun fact and a personal story. I met Danielle Cabral from New Jersey, and she was saying that she didn't watch any Real Housewives franchises except New Jersey before she was on the show. But the one housewife that she knew, the one that was ubiquitous, the one that she idolized, was Bethany, because Bethany has become more than more than a housewife. She is, again, just the ultimate girl boss before there was girl boss, entrepreneurial badass. Bethany, we love you. Mention it all. All right, so my least favorite is going to come as a surprise to absolutely nobody. As you can probably guess, it's a lady from the reboot that has been like a sinking ship ever since it started. I'm hoping that they have taken the lessons learned from this complete Roni reboot and seen the effectiveness of mixing old OGs with some fresh faces on Atlanta, and hopefully are planning to do that for Beverly Hills and Jersey and the other franchises that have lost steam a little bit. But back to Jenna Lyons. When she was announced as a cast member on Real Housewives of New York, people gasped, people cheered, we were excited. My mom, who doesn't even really watch Roni that much, I mean, she loves Ramona, but she's not like keeping up like I'm keeping up. Even she was like, Jenna Lyons, like, hello, the Jenna Lyons, the woman that made J. Crew a personality trait for young white women, the woman who wore tuxedos to galas and made sensible shoes high fashion. Surely this was going to be iconic, right? Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Jenna Lyons is many things. She is brilliant, stylish, wildly accomplished, but a good housewife, not even close. From episode 1, it was clear that she did not get the assignment. She treated Roni like a Vogue profile and not a Bravo battleground. And where was the drama? The delusion, the unhinged brunch breakdowns over who RSVP'd late. She is perpetually aloof, half present, and seemingly allergic to group settings. The other women were desperately trying to form bonds, a problem with the show being cast this way rather than finding women who all organically had connections, by the way. They were doing alliances, getting vendettas, housewife stuff, while Jenna kind of floated through scenes like an annoyed older cousin who agreed to be on this group trip but refuses to participate in any of the group activities. And let's talk about the hiding. Karen Huger, hello? She's hiding relationships, hiding emotions, hiding behind those comically oversized sunglasses she wore to the reunion, okay? The problem with Jenna isn't that she's above it all, it's that she acts like she thinks she is not. And housewife greatness requires vulnerability, pettiness, and at least one moment where you scream across a dinner table in the Hamptons. I think Jenna Lyons is a fascinating woman, but as a housewife, she's a loaf of unsalted, gluten-free artisanal bread, aesthetically pleasing, technically impressive, but completely lacking in flavor. So it's going to be a hard pass on phony Roni for me, and let's get some of these OGs back with some fresh faces. Thank you. All right, next we have a Housewives franchise that is killing the game right now, Real Housewives of Atlanta. I will say, just because it is a lot of their first seasons, I did not include any of these newbies in the running from the new season of Atlanta, but who knows, if we keep up and they keep killing it, maybe one of them will become my favorite one day. You never know. It's sort of like Abby Lee Miller with my Housewives, or Iron Claw. It's like the rankings can always change. They can always impress me, and the rankings can always change. But it's going to be pretty hard to beat the number one of Atlanta, because my favorite is obviously the incomparable Miss Nene Leakes.
Okay. Whatever that means. It's getting weird.
Now, I like to say that I was genetically predisposed to be a Nene Leakes fan, not even genetically, but just predisposed, because I saw her on Glee as Coach Roz Washington before I ever saw Real Housewives of Atlanta. So perhaps there was no way that it was going to ever be anybody except her, because once I see somebody standing next to Jane Lynch, the game is sort of over. However, I think even if I hadn't seen her on Glee, she would have been my favorite, because there are housewives and then there are icons, and Nene Leakes, again, a blueprint. The moment the Real Housewives of Atlanta without Nene is a peach without any juice. It's technically still there, but it's dry and it's bland and it's lacking soul. Now, let's not lie to ourselves. From her first confessional, Nene understood the assignment, like right away. She wasn't just like on a reality show. She kind of made the show her own. If the show had been called Nene and the Pips, I would have probably bought that. She was loud, yes. Wrong sometimes, also yes. But it wasn't just about drama. She had so much charisma, immediate catchphrases, comedy, this camera-ready confidence that made her must-see TV week after week. She gave us bloop. She gave us Close Your Legs to Married Men. She gave us Now Why Am I in It? I'm Just Sitting Here. She didn't just have one iconic moment. She has a catalog, and she's sort of the Beyonce of Bravo sound bites. Her meme moments from the show have become, again, cultural touchstones and completely ubiquitous, to the point where people who have never seen a franchise of Housewives in their lives, have never even seen an episode, they can tell you and finish the sentence of Nene Leakes moments. Like, they will know bling bling bling. Like, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that regardless. If you say it's getting weird, everybody knows that regardless of whether or not they know it came from the Real Housewives of Atlanta. She's just the blueprint. She's presidential. She's iconic. And while other housewives were kind of playing checkers at this moment, Nene was playing chess in heels. She knew how to lead a scene. She knew how to anchor a season. She knew how to carry a reunion without breaking a sweat. She could be messy and magnetic, cackling one second and reading someone for filth the next. And even when she was wrong, you still rooted for her. That's star power. But what makes her the greatest isn't just the drama, it's the depth. She lets us see it all: her messy family, her business hustle, her heartbreak, her glow-ups, her grief. And she wasn't afraid to be raw, or to cry on camera, or to fall out with friends and then make up later, which is the stuff of great housewives. Or not, depending on her mood. She made herself vulnerable, and in doing so, she made Atlanta more than a show. She made it a cultural phenomenon. Everybody wants to be a Nene, but not everyone can be a Nene. She's not just the best Atlanta housewife, she's one of the best, period, to ever do it. All right, another controversial take, I fear. My least favorite from Atlanta is probably Kim Zolciak. Let's call a spade a spade. I don't think she was ever cut out for Real Housewives of Atlanta. She was sort of like a background extra, I feel sometimes, who wandered into the main cast and then would refuse to leave, except when she left too early because she couldn't handle the heat and had to get out of the kitchen. She was always too sensitive, which is kind of the kiss of death for me as a Real Housewife. I hate when housewives are too sensitive and can't take a joke, or can't take any pushback about what they're offering. I think that people who are constantly personally victimized are exhausting to watch, and I think she fell into that pattern, especially during her later seasons. Obviously, who could forget when she famously quit the show on the show, like in the middle of filming. I think that if your emotional support husband needs to be parked outside during your scenes, then the Housewives universe probably is not your battlefield. That being said, tens where tens are due. Tardy for the Party is one of the most iconic Housewives songs of all time. And who knows, we would never have gotten Gone with the Wind Fabulous or On Display or Money Can't Buy You Class, maybe, if we had not had the iconic Don't Be Tardy for the Party. Don't be tardy for the party. I gotta go listen to that now. She was never the star, and that's okay. All right, now we're going to get into my absolute favorite franchise, which is Real Housewives of New Jersey, which might surprise some because obviously I'm from New York. But the reason New Jersey is my favorite is because I'm not just from New York. I'm from Astoria, Queens, New York, which is basically an Italian Mecca in Queens. So the women that I grew up around, all of my friends' moms, every woman that I encountered in a grocery store or saw walking down the street was more similar to the women that we see on Jersey. Very Italian American, very faith-based, very family-based. And I recognized more of my community and my neighborhood and my hometown in Jersey than I did in sort of the upper echelon of the Upper East Side on New York. That was very foreign to me, though it was entertaining. So New Jersey is the one that feels the most personal to me. I really recognize and relate to these women, and they're very similar to the kids that I went to school with and that I grew up around. The community to me is very familiar. So I just love Jersey so much. I think not only has it produced so many iconic, quotable, funny, dramatic, amazing Housewives moments, but also I just feel like, to me, it feels like the one that's the most organic. These women are really friends. And you can tell because how long has season 15 been on ice? They've been off the air for God knows how long now, and I still see them kikiing with each other literally every day. They're really friends. You can tell that they really have organic relationships. It does not feel overly produced, which seems to be a problem across a lot of franchises right now, is that the longer it goes on, it feels more and more produced. Jersey to me never feels produced because these women genuinely love each other and or genuinely want to kill each other. Props to Jersey, my favorite of all time, and I probably will end up doing a more in-depth like Jersey video just because it is my absolute favorite. So that being said, I'm ready for my first controversial take. Blah, 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 blah. Everyone's gonna yell at me, but my favorite is Melissa Gorga.
I know you hate me, but just try to control yourself.
Now, I know that, again, this is a controversial take, but I think I have an argument to back it up that may make you want to kill me less. So, Melissa Gorga may not always command the loudest voice in the Real Housewives of New Jersey ensemble, but over the years, she's really solidified herself as the franchise's quiet anchor, a centering force in a cast often dominated by chaos, volatility, and unrelenting family drama. And in many ways, her trajectory mirrors the ideal arc of a Bravo housewife: growth, adaptability, a refined understanding of the assignment. When she first entered the Jersey universe in season 3, she was framed both literally and narratively as the glamorous younger sister-in-law, charming, aspirational, unabashedly materialistic. There was a theatricality to her presence. Her early seasons were punctuated by pop songs, spray tans, and verbal spats that often fell into caricature. And at times it felt like she was trying to play the role of a housewife rather than live it. But what makes Melissa exceptional and arguably the most compelling cast member today is her ability to evolve without losing her identity. She has matured gracefully in front of the camera, developing from a slightly naive newcomer into a composed, perceptive, and shrewd woman who can both engage in the drama and rise above it when necessary. Her presence now feels deliberate, her words more measured. She's developed a keen awareness of when to lean in and when to step back, a skill that many housewives never fully master. She also provides something invaluable to the series, which is balance. In a cast often consumed by vendettas and alliances and intergenerational grudges, Melissa is the stabilizing agent. She is capable of expressing her perspective without veering into hostility, and she brings a groundedness that keeps the show tethered to some version of reality, even when the storylines veer towards the operatic, which I think tends to happen on Jersey a lot. Today, Melissa represents the modern archetype of the tentpole housewife. She's successful, she's self-aware, emotionally intelligent, and still unafraid to engage when when the moment calls for it. She's built a brand, raised a family, and participated in some of the show's most pivotal confrontations, all while avoiding the scorched earth reputation that has consumed so many others on her franchise. Her legacy may not be built on explosive fights or viral moments, but it's precisely her consistency, grace under fire, and willingness to evolve that make her indispensable to Jersey, in my opinion. So, we love you, Melissa. Now for my least favorite, which actually, surprisingly, I don't think will be controversial. I don't know anybody who rides for this woman, so if you disagree with me, that's totally fine, but just know you are one of one, because I don't know anybody who does. My least favorite is Kathy Wakili. Jersey is the franchise that I will say I had the most trouble coming up with a least favorite for. It's my favorite franchise, as I've said many a time, and even the villains on the show, like Danielle Staub, are vital to the ecosystem, but in the grand tapestry of the Real Housewives of New Jersey, where personalities are often as bold as the decor and tempers flare hotter than a Sunday sauce, Kathy Wakili's tenure felt curiously muted. While she entered the show with the promise of deep familial ties and a front row seat to the central Gorga Giudice drama, she ultimately struggled to carve out a space for herself that felt essential or even particularly memorable within the cast. To be clear, Kathy was never offensive, nor did she stir up unnecessary drama for the sake of camera time, but therein lies the problem. On a franchise that thrives on big personalities and emotional whiplash, Kathy's disposition often read more like an observer than a player. She was pleasant to a fault, and in a show that functions best when its cast is sharply drawn and unmistakably distinct, pleasant just doesn't cut it. She lacked the charisma, wit, or strategic savvy that defines a lasting housewife, the kind that can turn a mundane lunch into a battleground or a throwaway comment into a meme. Her storylines often centered on her dessert business or peripheral family tensions, but it never gained much traction, and her attempts at conflict resolution frequently fell flat, either ignored or steamrolled by bigger personalities. Kathy seemed to mistake being reasonable for being compelling, but unfortunately the two don't always overlap in the reality television ecosystem. Being level-headed may make for a good friend in real life, but on Jersey, it's the kiss of death. And there's Rich Wakili, a house husband who somehow managed to be both unfunny and overbearing, the reality TV equivalent of a broken smoke detector. Loud, unnecessary, and impossible to ignore. His presence did Kathy no favors, often pulling focus in the worst way possible with a grating mix of juvenile humor and unwarranted bravado. Rather than supporting his wife or elevating her presence, Rich had a knack for making scenes about himself, and not in the entertaining Joe Gorga way. More often than not, he was a liability, and in the end, Kathy Wakili wasn't disliked so much as she was underwhelming. A housewife who never quite figured out how to command the room or the audience. And in a franchise defined by extremes, she was simply too soft-spoken, too hesitant, and perhaps too normal for the world of Real Housewives. And for better or worse, normal just doesn't make it past the reunion. Now we're getting into the more modern era of Housewives, I will say, because our next franchise is Beverly Hills. So, just jumping right into it, my favorite on Beverly Hills is the iconic, the incomparable Lisa Rinna. Can't wait to hear what people have to say about that. There are housewives who participate in the drama, and then there are housewives who produce it, and not in an obvious way, in a almost involuntary way. Lisa Rinna was unapologetically the latter. Her tenure on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills marked a transformative era for the franchise, shifting it from a show about aspirational luxury and passive-aggressive brunches to a psychological battlefield where loyalty, grief, and glam were all weaponized with a perfectly glossed smile. She wasn't just playing the game, she was building the arena, and her brilliance lies not in her subtlety, because there was none, let's be honest, but in her total commitment to the performance. She understood Housewives as theater, Greek, tragic, and at times absurd, and she leaned into the role like a seasoned thespian. I mean, who could forget her look to the camera when Brandy says, "You've had the same hairdo for 20 years and you're basing it on my look?" Whether she was demanding someone own it, hurling accusations in Amsterdam, or offering a deeply unhinged take on Munchausen syndrome, Rinna didn't just stir the pot. She installed an industrial KitchenAid mixer and hit turbo speed. What makes her especially compelling is her elasticity. She shapeshifted from comic relief to antagonist to grief counselor to snake in the grass, sometimes all in the same episode, and she gave the audience what it craved most: unpredictability. One minute she's dancing in a wig or selling stuff on QVC, and the next she's cutting through someone's storyline with surgical precision and leaving no survivors. She made mess an art form, and she painted with a full palette. Rinna's real genius, though, was that she made the story without ever losing the thread of someone else's. She could simultaneously orchestrate conflict while appearing just removed enough to feign innocence. She'd light the match, toss it over her shoulder, and then act surprised when the house burned down. And yet we could never really turn on her as an audience. At least I couldn't, because for all of her machinations, Rinna was authentic in one key way. She always told us exactly who she was. I'll do anything for a buck. She meant it. That's honesty in its rarest form. In a franchise that often rewards artifice masked as vulnerability, I think Rinna's transparency about her motives felt like a refreshing twist. She was the rare housewife who could be both totally fake and completely real at the same time, and that duality is what made her dangerous, but it's also what made her iconic. She didn't just survive the reality TV gauntlet, she weaponized it, and whether you loved her, loathed her, or felt deeply unsettled by her facial expressions during tense dinners, one thing is quite certain: Beverly Hills has never been quite as brilliant or as bonkers without her. Now for my least favorite. I'm gonna have to take a drink because I think people are gonna be mad at me for this too. What if I just start every single one of these with people are gonna be really mad at me? People are gonna hate me. I'm scared to post this video. I'm genuinely scared. Okay. My least favorite in Beverly Hills history is Sutton Stracke. She might actually be one of my least favorite housewives across any franchise, not just Beverly Hills. I think she is absolutely insufferable. I think in the grand symphony of Beverly Hills, where wealth, wit, and weaponized social performance intermingle to form a sort of spectacle of high-stakes femininity, she's playing the wrong instrument in the wrong key. Other cast members either dazzle us with their charisma or command us or, just make us laugh. She just seems out of step with the rhythm of the show, like a well-heeled interloper whose delicate sensibilities are really mismatched with the gladiator type sport of housewives conflict. And from her earliest appearances as a friend of, she kind of positioned herself as a genteel oddity, a Southern belle adrift in the spangled wilds of Beverly Hills. But the charm quickly gave way to something far more grating: chronic hypersensitivity masquerading as vulnerability. What initially felt like a quirk soon calcified into a pattern of emotional fragility that sucked the air out of every room she entered. Conversations couldn't breathe, jokes couldn't land, and any tension, either real or imagined, would detonate into a tearful monologue about how she was the one being hurt. Her defining trait, and perhaps her greatest flaw in this context, is her insistence on being the perpetual victim. She does not merely experience discomfort, she magnifies it, she centers it, and she weaponizes it against whoever had the audacity to participate in the group dynamic. It's not that she gets upset, it's that she turns getting upset into a narrative engine, which derails the momentum of scenes and alienates the viewer from what is ostensibly supposed to be entertainment. Nowhere is this clearer to me than in the infamous Magic Mike Live debacle. A night of playful PG-13 frivolous fun devolved into an exercise in pearl clutching puritanism when Sutton, unable to handle the sight of a moderately choreographed sexual dance, stormed out of the performance in what can only be described as a joyless tantrum. What was meant to be a moment of lighthearted group bonding became a study in how personal discomfort, when not managed, can become a form of control. Rather than simply opting out, Sutton made her discomfort the main event, and once again recasting herself as the wounded party in a drama no one else signed up for. And to be clear, Housewives is a space that welcomes eccentricity and even celebrates it, but it demands a certain emotional agility, a willingness to spar, recover, and sip rosé in the aftermath. And Sutton, by contrast, clings to grievance with the tenacity of someone who has never learned to laugh at themselves. And in a franchise where camp, conflict, and charisma are the holy trinity, that is a fatal flaw. Ultimately, Sutton is not a bad housewife. Well, she's not bad television, but she's simply ill-suited to the ensemble that she's in. Her inability to read the tone or recalibrate after conflict or let others enjoy themselves without inserting her emotional baggage into the scene makes her exhausting to watch, and not in the delightful, messy icon sense, in the why is she crying again sense. Beverly Hills is built for diamond sharp personalities who can glide through drama with a wink and a wig change. But Sutton, bless her heart, she's made of something far more breakable. Now we're going to be getting into Miami. So I want to be giving a little disclaimer here and saying that I'm not going to be really focusing on the old Miami before it was rebooted for Peacock. I think that the Peacock original is basically the version of Miami that matters. I think the old Bravo-ish version was a little nebulous and weird, and I'm not getting into that. So I'm just going to be focusing on the Peacock version of Real Housewives of Miami, the version that is currently still going. So my favorite on Real Housewives of Miami is iconic Miss Alexia.
Okay, you feel like you were attacked all season.
Well, no, well, this is what happens, right?
Maybe that was your response because you felt like you were attacked, and then you said, I'm a star, I'm a star.
Because it's not even that. I still believe it, and I encourage all of you to believe it, because if you believe that, you wouldn't have not let Lenny do all the things he's done to you.
What?
Yes. Yes. You need to have self-confidence, Lisa.
Oh, my God.
Oh, no.
Wow.
No, that is not right.
I love her so much. I think that in a Housewives universe often buoyed by artifice and aspiration and self-styled narratives of reinvention, the Real Housewives of Miami's Alexia stands apart, not just as a dynamic personality, but as a woman whose lived experience carries the kind of gravity that transcends glam squads and cat fights. Among a sea of women vying for airtime, Alexia earns hers through emotional authenticity and narrative depth, wielding vulnerability and strength in equal measure. And to be transparent, my admiration for Alexia is not entirely objective, nor do I believe it needs to be. This is my opinion. The sibling of a developmentally disabled sister, close in age to her son Frankie, I bring to her story a more personal lens, one that sees not just the glossy surface of a Miami matriarch, but the emotional labor of caregiving, the fear that never entirely subsides, and the impossible calculus of loving fully while letting go. It's a journey that I recognize, and in that recognition, Alexia becomes more than a housewife to me. She becomes a mirror. Even beyond personal parallels, though, Alexia's storyline is, without exaggeration, one of the most compelling arcs across any Real Housewives franchise. Her life, rife with unimaginable highs and crushing lows, unspools with the cadence of a telenovela, except that it's all real. Her son's traumatic brain injury, a former husband who, after his death, is revealed to be living a double life, the trials of re-entering love, the daily labor of being both mother and advocate. These are not just plot points, they are marks of lived resilience. And what makes Alexia so arresting on screen is that she never reduces her life to trauma porn. She's not asking for pity. She's asking to be seen as a woman doing her best, failing sometimes, loving fiercely, and rising anyway. There's a rawness to her that feels increasingly rare in a franchise saturated with performative vulnerability and designer tears. Her strength doesn't come in the form of a takedown at a reunion couch. It's found in the quiet moments with Frankie, in the way that she advocates for his dignity, and in the deep emotional literacy she brings to every conversation, whether she's in conflict or communion. Alexia also reminds us that housewives at their best are not just entertainers, they're women through whom audiences can explore the many textures of life, its absurdities, its pain, its humor, and its hope. Her Miami is not just a playground for the fabulous, it's a backdrop to real endurance, and watching her navigate it is a privilege as a viewer. So, in sum, Alexia embodies what the Housewives format can be when it reaches beyond spectacle and taps into the soul. Her story is real, her presence is grounding, and for those of us who knows what it means to love and protect someone who can't always protect themselves, her strength feels not just admirable, it feels familiar. That being said, my least favorite is not as harsh as the other franchises, but it is Dr. Nicole. In a franchise known for operatic highs and cataclysmic lows and the intricate dance of personal reinvention, Nicole Martin presents a curious paradox, a woman with an ostensibly compelling resume. She's an anesthesiologist, a mother, a partner to a literal private jet owner, who somehow manages to deliver one of the flattest narrative arcs in recent Housewives memory. And to be fair, she checks many of the surface level boxes. She's accomplished, she's articulate, she seems deeply competent in both her personal and professional life, but I think that's kind of the central problem. Competence doesn't necessarily translate to compelling television. Watching her glide through episodes with the air of someone attending a very polite charity luncheon, always composed and rarely rattled and never truly vulnerable, feels like being under anesthesia by proxy. It's polished, but ultimately it's dull. Her personal storylines, such as they are, tend to orbit around emotional conflicts with the lowest stakes imaginable. Her father is problematic for sure, but not dramatically so. Her fiance is wealthy and vaguely aloof, but never enough to generate tension. And her journey from girlfriend to wife is paved with rose petals, not plot twists. Even her disputes with the other women feel more like HR-mandated conflict resolution exercises than organic interpersonal drama. What makes this all the more frustrating is that Nicole seems aware she's on a Housewives show, but she behaves as if she's above the genre's emotional demands. And rather than lead into that operatic absurdity I mentioned before that makes Miami so delicious, she often positions herself as the rational observer, the one who calls out the mess rather than engages with it. And this posture might earn her applause from Reddit threads and fans who say that she's mature, but it leaves her fundamentally miscast in a show that thrives on maximalist emotion. I think she's sort of like the human equivalent of a decorative vase in a Miami mansion. She's elegant and immaculately placed and completely inert. At worst, she feels like an intentional anchor on the show's momentum, deflating scenes with clinical detachment and robbing conflicts of the melodramatic spark that we tune in for. And in short, not every woman who's interesting on paper is interesting on camera. And while Nicole may be the first to remind us that she has a real job, it's precisely that and the need to be seen as above it all that renders her, ironically, the least memorable. Now, for a franchise that is super interesting for me to talk about because I'm currently in the middle of rewatching it, Real Housewives of Potomac. Now, I'm not going to get into the recent Karen drama. We will definitely touch on that on this channel at some point because I do want to chat about it. I think it's very interesting to sort of pair the recent legal troubles she's been in with her emotional journey on the show. All I'll say is that I wish her the best and I hope she has a lot of healing and that she gets out to be on our screens again soon. However, I am going to say, let me take another drink. My favorite on Potomac is Monique Samuels.
You sitting up here sitting like a darn fraud, bringing a different man onto the reunion every freaking year. I hope he's sitting behind you this year, Pastor Holy Whore. Ooh. Since you want to keep calling my husband Big Boy.
Is Jamal coming? No, he's not. Of course not.
Wow.
Finish him.
Boyfriend is slinging his big D all around his congregation, even in Atlanta as we speak, and you know it. You know it. You're a fraud.
Any reaction to this?
Of course she doesn't have a reaction because she knows it's true.
Within the ever-shifting dynamics of Potomac, Monique kind of stands out as a singular figure. She's equal parts powerhouse and peacemaker, traditional wife and modern entrepreneur, loyal friend and sharp-tongued adversary. And her run on the show was defined by a kind of elegant duality rarely seen in the franchise. She could go from quoting scripture to scalping reputations in the same breath, and she did it all with the unapologetic confidence that was often misread as arrogance. But for those paying attention, it was really clear that she was a force, that she anchored the show with a quiet but unshakable authority. And what made Monique particularly refreshing was her refusal to perform vulnerability for the sake of audience relatability. Her life was aspirational. She had a stunning home and a beautiful family and multiple streams of income. Who could forget the now iconic Not for Lazy Moms empire? But she was also grounded in an ethos of authenticity. When she chose to open up, it wasn't in service of a manufactured redemption arc or PR cleanup. It was because she genuinely had something to say. Whether discussing her mother-in-law, miscarriages, or the isolating experience of being a successful woman among a cast eager to caricature her, Monique brought a level of substance that elevated every scene she was in. And yet, despite her narrative richness and undeniable charisma, she was unceremoniously pushed out of the Potomac universe, the result of a conflict that, while explosive, I thought was hardly unprecedented within the Housewives canon. So, like, justice for Monique or whatever. I think that the fact that she was so swiftly villainized for that altercation, which arguably involved mutual provocation, speaks volumes about the politics of likability and the selective moral high ground that Bravo can often take, depending on the way the fans feel. I think the network has long rewarded women for weaponizing words words, with surgical cruelty. So to punish Monique so harshly for a physical escalation of that, particularly after her genuine attempts at accountability and personal growth, felt not only inconsistent, but deeply unjust to me. And her exit left a conspicuous vacuum in the franchise that really, to me, has never been filled. I felt like she was not merely the homemaker, not only the fighter, not simply the friend. She contained multitudes, and she challenged the audience to hold space for all of them. I thought she was a standout cast member and also a litmus test of how much complexity we're willing to tolerate in our housewives. I think the fact that she failed this test says more about the system and about us as viewers than it does about her. I will say my least favorite in this franchise is probably Dr. Wendy. I think in theory, Dr. Wendy should be a housewife slam dunk, and I'm sure many viewers out there do feel that way. She's got degrees, designer wardrobe, the family drama, the kind of articulate poise that really reads well in confessionals, but in practice, she's one of the most frustrating presences Potomac has ever hosted. For all her claims of empowerment and elevated discourse, Wendy routinely engages in a kind of rhetorical bait and switch. She provokes and prods and lobs thinly veiled insults with a scholarly smile, and then when the recipient responds in kind, she retreats to a position of moral superiority so rapidly one might mistake her for a professional victim. This pattern is as predictable as it is exhausting. Wendy often enters scenes with an agenda, sometimes under the guise of intellectual inquiry, sometimes cloaked in sisterly concern, but the underlying tone is almost always one of condescension. She stirs the pot while insisting she's just seasoning the stew, and then acts aghast when things boil over. This is not to say that she isn't intelligent, because she is, or stylish, because she's definitely that, but intellect without self-awareness is just arrogance in a cap and gown. What's particularly maddening is the discrepancy between how Wendy sees herself and how she operates. She fancies herself the voice of reason, the academic with class and tact, the woman above the fray, and yet she never misses an opportunity to descend into it. It's not the conflict itself that's the problem, because this is Housewives after all. Conflict is very welcome. It's the disingenuous way that she participates in that conflict. She throws verbal punches and then clutches her pearls when someone dares to swing back. It's performative righteousness masquerading as grace. And in the Housewives ecosystem, where self-awareness and shade must walk hand in hand, Wendy remains a chronic mismatch. There's nothing wrong with having substance on a show rooted in spectacle, but when the substance comes wrapped in hypocrisy and a refusal to own your part in the drama, it becomes grating rather than grounding. Wendy may have the credentials, but she lacks the core Housewives quality, the ability to be both messy and self-aware. Until she learns to sit in the chaos she so often initiates, she'll remain more irritant than icon to me. Now we're getting into the it girl, the moment, the franchise of the moment. I think this is the franchise on everybody's lips, and actually, surprisingly, I don't think my picks are that controversial. I think they go with the general vibe of the audience. I might be completely wrong about that and about to get my ass handed to me, so let's see, shall we? Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. My favorite is the incomparable, incredible, iconic Mary Cosby.
I would love to teach you a cooking lesson. Today, I'm so tired. One of the members in our church, one of their daughter, had a crash.
When?
Today, last night. And she was ejected from the sunroof and fell down into a neighborhood. 30 feet. Drop off the freeway.
Is she still alive?
No. I'm excited to be here. Wear your seatbelt.
I think in Real Housewives, where casting shakeups and chaos often eclipse character arcs, there is something rare and almost radical about watching a housewife grow. Our reigning star of Salt Lake City, according to me, and also, let's be honest, she's just the star of Salt Lake City. She gives the viewers the greatest gift reality television can offer: authentic character development. From her early seasons where walls were high and vulnerability was rationed, to her most recent appearances where emotional honesty, accountability, and genuine humor reign, she has slowly but surely transformed from a guarded participant into a fully realized protagonist. And this isn't a reinvention for reinvention's sake. This is the result of emotional excavation, earned trust with the audience, and a conscious conscious decision to let us in. And we're better for it. I think she's not afraid of conflict, and thank God for that, but she also doesn't wield it so recklessly anymore. When she fights, it's with stakes and substance and not for spectacle. And there is an emotional intelligence to the way that she engages in the group dynamics. She knows when to escalate and when to pull back. And let's talk about the comedy, because she is funny. Not makes a face in a confessional funny, like hysterically, constantly funny. She is a quick-witted bull in a china shop, and in a city where the air is thin but the drama is thick, her levity is a blessed reprieve. There is true joy in watching her thrive, especially as her openness grows season by season. And then there's Angie K. Their friendship isn't just good television, it's good humanity. In a franchise often built on transactional alliances and frenemy facades, what these two have is real. Their bond offers something quietly radical, emotional safety in a genre predicated on betrayal. Their support of one another, equal parts hilarious and heartwarming, is one of the most affecting relationships in all of Housewives history. I think that Mary Cosby is the entire package. She's dynamic, she's funny, she's vulnerable, she's deeply watchable and rewatchable. Her journey is proof that this franchise still has the capacity for real storytelling and for arcs that reward longtime viewers with depth, not just drama. And in a landscape where many cast members remain frozen in the versions of themselves they arrived with, she blooms and blooms and blooms. Now for my least favorite. I'm not going to get into the current drama surrounding this one. I'm going to wait for it to play out next season, because right now all we have are rumors, and I don't want to play into rumors that might not be true. I certainly hope that they're not true, but my least favorite right now is Miss Meredith Marks. And I feel bad for saying that, because I met Meredith and she was really nice, and I'm sure she's very nice in person, but as a viewer, I've been a bit frustrated with her, especially the last 2 seasons. I think that there's something to be said for a consistent character on a Real Housewives franchise, a figure who brings gravitas, an aesthetic, and a clear point of view. But when that point of view is an eternal grievance, the glamour wears off fast. Meredith Marks is a woman whose persona is as cold as the slopes of Park City, and unfortunately just as emotionally remote. On paper, she should work. She's stylish, she's enigmatic, she has the cadence of someone who maybe read a book about Audrey Hepburn once. Why not? But in practice, she's a housewife who turns every interaction into a courtroom deposition and every joke into a hate crime. There's a difference between having boundaries and weaponizing victimhood, and Meredith consistently lives in the latter camp. Her overreactions are the stuff of memes, yes, but viral moments are not a substitute for an actual sense of humor. And watching her blow a lighthearted comment about hearing aids into a full-blown scandal about quote-unquote making fun of the disabled wasn't just a reach, it was the disservice to a very real issue that she was attempting to invoke. And when everything is treated like a personal attack, nothing feels sincere. It becomes impossible to engage with her or to root for her, because every scene is laced with ice, fog, and a vague whiff of moral superiority. There's very little joy in her presence on the show. She doesn't lean into the absurdity of the format and doesn't play ball when it's time to have fun. Sometimes she seems incapable of laughing at herself, which is the single most important skill in the Housewives playbook. And her storylines feel like contractual obligations rather than an organic narrative. The emotional stakes rarely land because they're buried under 10 layers of defensiveness. And yes, I will say her voice is iconic. The bathtub scenes are oddly hypnotic, but a few meme-worthy moments can't distract from the fact that Meredith brings an energy that's more draining than dynamic. She is quite simply a woman so committed to perceived injustice that she forgets she's on a show meant to entertain. In a cast full of emotionally rich, unpredictable, and often deeply funny women, Meredith's presence feels like a sad, slow sigh. All right, we're rounding it up. This video is like an hour long already. Okay, this is the last franchise. God love you if you've stayed this long. Dubai. First of all, justice for Dubai. I thought that franchise was freaking incredible, and by the time it went off the air, I thought that they really had gotten in a good groove where everybody really knew what they were doing and the storylines were really consistent and really compelling. Bring Dubai back. I need you all to go on Peacock and please watch Dubai so that they can bring it back as a Peacock original a la Miami, because I don't know what I'm going to do without it. I miss my favorite, who is Chanel Ayan.
Have a glass of Pinot Noir?
Yes.
While I'm waiting for my friends.
I might make you a queen next to me, but I'm still the VVIP queen.
I think I'm too early. I'm supposed to be the last one, no?
Should be.
Seriously, where the are they? These girls are gonna be late. I'm gonna have fun on my own. I can enter
entertain myself without anybody.
I think Chanel emerged not merely as a standout, but just as a singular force of nature across all of Bravo. She's not just the best in her cast, but she's kind of the blueprint for what a next generation housewife should be. She's unfiltered, she's unforgettable, she's emotionally resonant beneath all of her couture. And from her very first confessional, it was clear Ayan wasn't playing by the rules. She was the rules on this show. Her voice, her look, her attitude, everything about her was wholly original and utterly magnetic. She's one of those rare Bravo stars who can be both riotously funny and devastatingly vulnerable in the same breath, pairing a supermodel's poise with a jester's timing. She's aware of her camera time, sure, but never in a way that feels forced or overly produced. Her charisma is as natural as her cheekbones are sculpted. Please don't drive down my street when I'm talking about Chanel Ayan. But beneath her Gucci turbans and her dramatic one-liners, there's a woman with a story that's profoundly moving. It's like 10 motorcycles driving down my street right now. She was not just there to serve looks and shade, although she does both flawlessly. She was there to be seen. Her openness about her traumatic past, including experiences of abuse, displacement, and female circumcision, brought a depth to her character that many franchises struggle to achieve in 5 seasons, let alone 1 or 2. And the way that she shared those truths, not just as a bid for sympathy, but as a declaration of strength, is the very essence of what makes her iconic. She also just understood the assignment right away. She didn't just deliver drama, she kind of elevated it to a high art. She could spar with a castmate 1 minute and have an entire audience howling with laughter the next. Her reads are legendary, and her presence injects life into every scene she touches. Even when she's just sitting silently in her confessional chair, she's doing something with her eyes, with her posture, and her sheer force of will. And obviously we can't forget about the fashion. Her wardrobe was not just fashion, it was statement, it was spectacle, and sometimes it was a spiritual experience for both her and for us. She wears couture the way most of us wear pajamas, comfortably, confidently, and with zero concern for the opinions of others. She is, quite simply, the best dressed housewife in franchise history. I said what I said. In a show still carrying out its identity, Chanel Ayan is the identity. She brings the heart, the humor, the pathos, and the performance. She's a walking contradiction in the best way. She's sharp and soft, extra and earnest, ethereal and earthy. And watching her was a joy and education and a reminder that when Bravo gets it right, really right, it can feel like magic. Long may she reign. My least favorite will be a surprise to literally no one, and I know I said at the top of this video that I wouldn't do any one-season wonders, but I'm gonna make an exception for Dubai because it literally was on the air for like 3 years, so I'm a little limited in what I can play with here. My least favorite of Dubai was Nina. I think that she was a bit of a placeholder. Her presence was less about making waves and more about like filling out the group photo. On Dubai, she played that role dutifully and dully. And to be clear, not every housewife needs to be a scene-stealing diva or a fire starter, but they do need to give us something, a compelling personal arc, a moment of vulnerability, some levity, some style, some shade, at minimum, some semblance of a point of view. But unfortunately, she seemed to have confused merely existing on television as actually contributing to the show and to the genre. It was kind of like the reality TV equivalent of background music in a luxury hotel lobby. She was pleasant enough, but ultimately forgettable. And also in a cast stacked with larger than life personalities, she sort of faded into the wallpaper. There was no strong narrative arc, no emotional vulnerability, no memorable one-liners, and certainly no tension that isn't immediately diffused with a soft-spoken shrug. When the most interesting thing about you is that you like fruit maybe, or that you're buying a new house, the bar is just simply too low. And that's not to say that she's a bad person. She's clearly thoughtful, loyal, and by all appearances very lovely. However, this is a housewives show and not a friendship or leadership retreat, so nice without nuance, depth, or narrative is simply not enough. And when stacked against Chanel Ayan's emotional gravity or Caroline Stanbury's wit, even Lisa Milan's snappy confidence, Nina comes across less like a diamond in the rough and more like cubic zirconia, technically part of the collection but not bringing any sparkle. And she had opportunities, moments where the show dangled the potential for deeper engagement like homesickness or relationship dynamics, but nothing was ever mined for real storytelling. Whether by choice or lack of capacity, she kept herself sealed tight, giving viewers little to connect with or root for. And in a city as bold and over the top as Dubai, that's not just a misstep, it's a disservice. Ultimately, her time on Dubai felt like a case study in missed potential. Her exit from the series was neither scandalous nor sentimental, and maybe that says it all. A legacy of a housewife should stir emotion, spark debate, or at the very least leave an impression, and her departure felt more like a gentle breeze than a gust of desert wind. You noticed it for a moment, and then it was gone. I will say, just to close out this video, if you've made it this long, you are an absolute saint, or you just scrubbed ahead, and that's fair too. I can't get ad revenue yet, so I don't care how far you watch. It's just for my viewing pleasure. Being a Real Housewife is not for the faint of heart. I think, you know, the shows give us something to love or someone to loathe or something to remember, and sprinter vans and prosthetic legs or showing us just what's going on in their lives. Being a housewife is a really hard job, so I just have to say, no matter who you are, if you are one of my favorites or least favorites, I have major flowers for you, 10s across the board, because it's a very hard job to say yes to, and I think that you put yourself out there for a lot of criticism, including me in this video, and I think that in itself, you should get free drinks for the rest of your life if you've ever been a housewife. I will say to my favorites, thank you for the laughs, for the drama, for all your growth. To my least favorites, may your storylines improve, your taglines land, and your time on my television be mercifully cut short. So until next time, don't text me, don't invite me to your event, don't come for me unless I send for you. Kidding. I'll be back hopefully with a shorter video and one that doesn't require me referencing the Cambridge Analytica version of the Real Housewives page. Okay, bye. Roll credits. Mazel.